What's up guys, James from SIKKY Manufacturing. Today I'm going to show you a step-by-step installation guide on how to get this Doucheworks 300C upgraded fuel pump into your FRS and BRZ. Make this install real simple on you, take you step by step, show you what to do, what not to do, make that install super easy. Let's get started. All right, so behind the driver's seat we're going to access this 10 mil bolt. Take that out, allows you to pick up the back of the front of the back seat and get it up out of the way. Now we can gain access to this fuel panel here that gets you down to where the fuel tank is. All right, so now we have access to this cover. This is actually glued down with an adhesive, so you just want to really carefully kind of pry up on this thing. Try to separate the adhesive. We're trying not to bend this thing too much, so we can just put it right back down and it'll stick right back to the adhesive when we're done. It's pretty gooey stuff, so usually works well as long as you don't bend the hell out of this thing when you're taking it up, but just kind of work your way around. Give it a little tweak. And once it really starts to separate, then it gets easier. It's almost like windshield sealant. It's probably very similar to that, but for some reason you needed to put new sealant on this thing. I'm sure you could use the same product you would use on a windshield and it would work fine. It's gooey stuff though. I just separate it and stick it back down where it was. All right, so now we got access to this. We're gonna knock this ring loose that's on here, unplug the line, unplug this sensor, or the power, I should say. All right, so first I'm gonna disconnect this fuel line from the top of the pump, get that out of the way, and try to get this ring loose now. Gonna knock it counterclockwise. Once it gets loose, you can move to using your hands to spin it, but it does have an index mark too when you're tightening it back down to line it up, so you know it's properly tightened. Now it's loose enough to just spin by hand. I'm gonna keep turning it. Just, you know, keep track of the seal. I'll loosen any of that and get that off. Now we should be able to pick up on the fuel system, or the fuel hanger, I should say. And just remember, there's like a crossover tube that goes to the other side of the saddle tank, so dump the excess fuel back in here. Try not to make a mess. Let's see, I just remember you got the fuel level float, and then right here you're going to disconnect this crossover. And then we'll take this out of the car to do the actual fuel pump installation. All right, to get access to the pump, we're gonna need to separate the top and the bottom. There's a little snap ring on this side of this shaft that comes up, so we're just gonna pop this off. And once you remove that, it allows this thing to separate from the bottom. Keep in mind you got some wiring that's also holding things together, so just carefully route that out from underneath the plastic hooks that are kind of securing it. Once you do that, it gives you enough room to separate this and get access to the bottom. All right, so we got that off. fuel pump itself is down in here, which is held in by these little clips. 3 of them in total. So once you pop them out, then you can lift this whole thing out of the bottom. So just be careful, you don't have to unhook these hoses. You just want to be careful in the process where we're not kinking things or bending it and messing anything up. So same thing, you can separate all this stuff. Just kind of get it out of your way. And now we're going to unhook everything off the bottom here. Once you undo those clips, out comes the pump. And there you go, factory FRS fuel pump. All right, so the piece that was clipped onto the pump that actually holds the regulator into the bottom of this housing, we're only gonna reuse part of it. We don't reuse the part that holds the fuel pump in. It doesn't actually fit on the DoucheWorks pump. It would be nice, it's actually real close if it did pop in there, but I think just the size, it's a little bit longer, but either way, I'm gonna run the bigger, higher flow pump. Comes in the box. We got a new harness. We're not gonna reuse this little sleeve either that was in the factory one. So in the DoucheWorks box, there are gonna be 3 O-rings. There should be one still down in the port where your fuel pump came out. If not, it might be stuck on here, but either way, this 300C pump uses all 4 of these O-rings. Of course, we got a new sock that's gonna go on the bottom, and then some lube to kind of grease up those O-rings and make sure they slide in easily into the housing. So set this stuff aside. So yeah, first step, we get these O-rings installed over the outlet of the pump. And you can just kind of push them down. They're gonna get smashed up in there once you get going. Put a little bit of lube on here. In this case, the other O-ring is in there, so I'm gonna remove it just so we can make sure it goes on nicely with the other ones. Doesn't bind up or anything. Just take some of that. This grease will just dissolve in the fuel like instantly, so you don't have to worry about it getting on anything, but this makes it go up in the housing a little bit easier. All right, so you're not gonna be able to see in there, but if you look up in there, there's a hole. You're gonna drop this down in and then begin to slide it in. So one thing to note, you kind of have to pull over on the pump to get the plug to come through this to get it all the way seated. It'll kind of look like it's installed, but then if you lean it and push, it'll pop past. So that the plug is actually coming all the way up into this little cutout instead of being underneath of it. So that's how you know it's kind of seated, and you can use a little persuasion on the table. Make sure you take the harness. This side goes to the pump, the gray one goes back to the factory side. And then we're gonna press the sock on. Make sure that gets up in there good. Just want to make sure we got a good seal so it's drawing the fuel through the sock and not around it. All right, so before we drop the pump into the bottom of the housing, we're going to need to separate this piece that holds the regulator up into this housing. We're not going to be reusing this because it doesn't fit. So a number of different ways you can do it. You know, a saw, you can score it with a razor blade. Just want to try to keep it intact to the point where it'll do its job. It's not super crucial that it looks pretty or is done any certain way, but I usually just score it like this, and you can give it a little bit of a twist. Simple as that, just snaps off. And then this is what secures the regulator back in here so it can't drop out. So at that point, we've got everything ready to go back into the bottom of the housing here. This ring I took off in a previous step. It doesn't actually need to be taken off initially, but once you get that back on this thing, you're just gonna drop it back in, make sure everything looks good and lined up. Don't wanna pinch any wires or anything like that. Make sure this fully clips in. So it does apply some pressure up to the bottom of the pump too, just kind of helps ensure that it doesn't go anywhere. All right, so you're gonna rotate this a little bit. Get the wires out of the way for the moment. We're gonna slide these two posts back down in, and at the same time, I'm gonna guide this excess fuel hose down into this little compartment on the side here. You kind of got to manipulate these rods a little bit, but they'll go in. So once you get that in, don't forget you got to put your clip back on. And that just makes sure that it doesn't fully pop out. Everything looks good, so we're going to move on to plugging everything in. So it's the reverse of what you did when you took it off. Obviously the new wires on this pump are a little bit beefier. We're going to route these through the factory clips and plug in. And we're going to do the same with the fuel level sensor sender wires and plug them in. So all that looks good. And when it's installed in the car, everything does kind of press down in. So you want to make sure if you fully compress this that nothing's doing anything weird, rubbing on something we don't want it to rub on, and just make sure everything looks secure and neatly routed. When it's fully compact, nothing's touching or doing anything bad, so I think we're good to go. All right, so that is pretty much it in a nutshell. Now we're ready to put this thing back into the car. All right, so a reverse of the process taking it out. First thing I like to do is plug in this crossover hose. And then we're gonna carefully guide the fuel level sender in, then the hose itself. All right, and then we're going to rotate it back to the same orientation. And this is where you want to make sure that everything feels normal and everything's sitting properly down in the fuel tank, because this piece actually presses this big rubber seal into the tank as you tighten that ring. So if it's not dropping all the way down in now, then you got an issue. So just want to make sure it feels secure. All right, this is a super important step before you put the ring on. Just want to make sure that your seal is all the way down in, so you can kind of rotate the pump and feel around. Sometimes it'll get hung up on the edges and it won't allow it to sit tight and seal actually in the top of the tank. So be careful you get that right, and you're going to take your ring, reinstall that kind of while you're holding everything down. It has a tendency to want to pop up on you since there's a spring in there. But then we're going to, while we're holding it down, we're going to get this ring started. It's going to be a little bit difficult sometimes, but once you get started though, you're going to thread it down. Try to keep the pump housing indexed properly with the blue arrow that's pointing towards the back. Not sure if it's always blue, but it is on the ones I've done. All right, so we got that, it's going. Now we're gonna tighten it down till the blue arrow lines up. This is what really kind of puts the tension on it. You can see, I don't know, the blue arrows right here starting to come around. So I got it as tight as I could with my hand, and then this last quarter turn is crucial, just to make sure we got the right seal. Almost there. There you go. All right, so now that we got this back in, we're just gonna hook up the factory line, plug this connection back in. Once you route it through the hole, get your grommet back on. And we're gonna plug it in and then press it down into location. And just try to line up the edge with the adhesive so it sticks back on like it was. There's a little mark over here on this side that you can align with. Yeah, once you get in place, you just bang it down. Make sure the adhesive, you can use like a rubber mallet or something like that, and you're literally done the fuel pump install after you put this bolt in. So very simple process. Tighten this bolt up and obviously turn the key on, make sure you've got everything's working right. There's no issues, no fuel leaks, nothing weird going on. That's it, real basic install. All right, so that's a wrap on the fuel pump install for this FRS. As you can see, pretty simple. Hope this install guide makes your life a little easier when you're upgrading your fuel pump. Thanks for watching.